Welcome to the game. I'm Mark Simon.
And I'm Bob Marks.
And we are happy to be joined by Eliot Storch from the Deputy Sheriff's Association and from Sean Harper, Organization of Sheriff Sergeants, to talk about ballot measure A, the only thing on the ballot for March 4th. If you want to watch this podcast, you can always go to YouTube, or you can also go to any of the places you go to get podcasts. On December 1st, the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors put a measure on the ballot that would amend the county charter and allow them to hold a hearing and determine whether or not to fire Sheriff Christina Corpus. If they choose to do so, it requires a 4-vote majority on a 5-member board. There's been a Yes on A campaign that both Eliot Storch and Sean Harper have been very, very actively involved in. There's been no active campaign other than personal appearances and social media postings by the sheriff. By the way, we have invited both the sheriff and her chief of staff, Victor Aenlle, to come on this show a number of times. They have always said they will come on and then had said they would get back to us with a date, and they have yet to do so. We continue to extend that offer to them. We would certainly love to have the chance to hear their side of the story as well. Let me start with you, Eliot. The number one criticism I'm hearing over and over again is, why didn't you just do a recall? She was elected by a vote of the public. Shouldn't she be ousted by a direct vote of the public on the question of whether or not she should stay in office?
So Measure A still is a vote of the public. The public votes on whether to amend the charter. For all intents and purposes, this charter is essentially an expedited recall. That's because it sunsets when in 2028, when Sheriff Corpus's term is scheduled to end. So it's only for a limited time. Because of that, and how specifically it's targeted, it really functions the same as a recall. The voters still get to have their say, and it really is just for this sheriff. The reason why we can't wait for a full recall is just the amount of damage that Sheriff Corpus is doing. And it's not hyperbole to say that people's careers and people's lives are at risk every time that she continues to do things. She has already falsely arrested the president of our union, Carlos Tapia, and tried to harm his career, his livelihood. So we take this seriously. Every minute she stays in office puts more of us in danger and puts this agency more in danger.
Sergeant Harper, it's not an expedited recall in the sense that it is not a recall. The recall would have required collecting petition signatures. There are people who say this is an overreach by the board, not the sheriff who says it's a power grab by the board, but even, civilians, for lack of a better word, say that this is an overreach and that the board should have gone ahead and pushed for a recall.
I'm like, to echo what Eliot said, we view this as more of a exigent circumstance. If we had the time, if the allegations weren't rooted in, the type of corruption that we've been dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and the men and women the sheriff's office haven't been dealing with on a day-to-day basis, if they weren't quite literally at risk of being arrested, I think that a recall, the recall process would be ideal. It's unchallengeable. It's been tested. It just happened in Alameda County, in San Francisco County, and I think everybody involved would much rather go that route. Would have rather gone that route, but we see this as a very emergency type situation where we needed to do this, and the Board of Supes felt that way, and that's why they went that way.
Eliot, are you surprised the sheriff has run appears to be a very minimal campaign, not raising money? Are you surprised at that?
No, primarily because she has so little support from what we've seen. There's very few, if any, elected officials who are vocally supporting her. Very few, if any, members of the sheriff's office who are vocally supporting her. It really does seem to be just her, and then the one individual who wrote the ballot argument against. There's so little support because I think she has alienated everybody who used to support her. That's been one of the most interesting things to me, is seeing that some of the biggest supporters of Measure A were people who 2 years ago in 2022 were such huge supporters of her getting elected.
Sean, let me ask you, you describe it as an emergency. I think Eliot said it was exigent circumstances. How bad is it?
I mean, it's a great question. I mean, it's unprecedented, to say the least. I mean, we are, when I describe it to other people that are in this industry that, that have gone through, I mean, not situations exactly like this. It's bad. The morale is horrible. It's the worst I've seen in the 20 years that I've been doing this job. It's people are legitimately scared. They're worried that just by coming out, by speaking out, by expressing their not just their opinions but their experiences, that they're going to be arrested. And we can't operate like that. It's that's when it really starts to affect and erode the public safety aspect of what we do, and it makes us far less effective.
Well, we've seen in Judge Cordell's report, I mean, the key telling phrase is that lies, secrecy, intimidation, retaliation, conflicts of interest, and abuses of authority are the hallmarks of the Corpus administration. And you said people are having experiences that apparently match that rhetoric. Give us an idea. What sort of experience have you had, if you've had one directly, and what sort of experiences have you heard about? Give us a sense of what you're talking about when you say people are having bad experiences.
Well, I mean, obviously, in my opinion, the Cordell report speaks for itself, and I don't want to speak for any of the witnesses that were brave enough to come forward and to, share their experiences. But, as far as the day-to-day experiences of what people are going through here, there's no leadership coming from the top. We are rudderless. We don't have any clear directive coming from the top. We don't have any real leadership coming from the top. So we're relying on captains. We're relying on lieutenants. We're relying on sergeants to continue to run this organization that needs to run. I mean, it is a critical part of the law enforcement infrastructure in this county, and it needs to continue. But not having any leadership or clear directives, it makes it very difficult, and it makes it very chaotic because, we can't get trainings aren't getting approved. Purchase orders aren't getting approved. Just things that need to contracts need to get approved. And we're seeing a delay in that. We're seeing a flat out just things not getting done. And it's very, very damaging to the overall organization.
But that's not what most of what you've been talking about, Eliot. You're talking about what was characterized by Judge Cordell as an atmosphere of intimidation, retaliation, and conflicts of interest. Do you have any examples of things happening that were, really questionable ethically or even corrupt? I mean, we've heard the word corruption over and over again.
Well, I think the biggest one is the unlawful arrest of President Tapia. That is, without a doubt, one of the most egregious examples of union busting and retaliation I think that I've ever seen. And I think that a lot of people who have been involved with organized labor for their entire lives have ever seen. We believe, we meaning the DSA and I believe the OSS as well, we believe that was a criminal conspiracy. We believe that Sheriff Corpus engaged in a criminal conspiracy to unlawfully arrest Tapia. The timing of that arrest was designed to try and get the news cycle prior to the expected release of Judge Cordell's report. Clearly that backfired for her. And as District Attorney Wagstaff showed, there was absolutely no basis for that arrest to happen. And that was one of the big moments. There were obviously, the many instances discussed in Judge Cordell's report, but that was a big eye-opening moment for a lot of people within the organization. And that was the moment when I think a lot of people went from being nervous or concerned to being genuinely scared and terrified. I know that was for me. for a long time, I still am concerned that somehow I'm going to get retaliated against, that I'm going to end up getting arrested for something that has absolutely no basis. We pay attention to when Sheriff Corpus's car is in her parking spot, so we know if it's safe to take the elevators or if we have to take the back stairs so we don't run into her. And it's pretty insane that we train law enforcement professionals who, with a badge and a gun, have to think like that. But that's the big example of the culture that she has created, is that people are so afraid of even just running into her.
Well, what are you afraid of? Suppose you do run into her. What are you afraid is going to happen? Is she going to start yelling at you, or?
Well, verbal abuse is one thing. I'm afraid that she's going to try and make something up. I'm afraid that she is going to order her undersheriff to arrest me for something. I'm afraid that she is going to try and put words into my mouth, that if I say good morning, she'll say that I used a slur, that I insulted her, I was disrespectful or disobedient. And quite frankly, it's actually safer for me to keep my mouth shut. So if she does try and make up allegations like that and put me through an internal affairs investigation, the cameras will show I didn't say a word. It's easier if I just don't see her. But those fears are legitimate given what's happened. We have people who have been put on admin leave and weren't told why. We have people who are getting internal affairs investigations on them, and it seems like the only reason is that they either are or they're connected to somebody who's spoken out. And then obviously President Tapia's arrest, which showed that there is no level to which she won't stoop.
Sean, you mentioned one of you. Purchase orders aren't being made. That there's an administrative gap, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. But the sheriff has been sending out press releases saying that she's hired over 180 new deputies, new staff. Is that just not true?
It's just not true. I mean, yeah, she's hired some people, but we've lost an unprecedented amount of people in that same time. We are still, all of our bureaus are still dangerously understaffed. And the fact that she's hired a bunch of people, that doesn't even offset the people that have left, and not just because of the normal attrition through retirements. They've gotten out of the profession. They've gone to other agencies. They've gone to other agencies in this county that we never lose people to. And, that just kind of goes to what's happening in this organization. People don't want to work here. They don't want to be subjected to this every day. They don't want to have the fear that, like Eliot, put, that there's a legitimate fear that they're going to get retaliated against for no reason, for made up reasons, or for perceived slights, or things like that. So in my opinion, it's just not true. I mean, the numbers just don't match up, and you can shuffle numbers around and put out numbers that everything's great, but it's not fact.
Eliot, let me take a step backward. The sheriff was elected in 2022. When did you first become aware there may be some kind of problem with the sheriff and her chief of staff, Mr. Aenlle?
For me personally, actually, probably later than some other people. Most of my patrol time was spent pretty far away from Redwood City. But when I got on the board, on the DSA board in July of 2024, and we had a meeting with the sheriff in August of 2024, that was the first moment for me. I realized, oh, wow, something's not right. And then I got filled in. That meeting in August was about mandatory overtime, and Sheriff Corpus literally ended up yelling and screaming in this meeting, provided absolutely zero answers to our questions. It was actually one of the meetings which was a basis for some of our unfair labor practices that we filed with PERB over their refusal to meet and confer. And that was really eye-opening to me. And then starting to listen to other people and realize that the issues with Victor Aenlle went back to the campaign before she was even elected. I just hadn't seen them personally because I was removed from it at the time.
Sean, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I've been kind of, based on my assignment, I've been kind of, off site. So I didn't really, get to see it firsthand, right away. in my interactions that I've had and that I saw, it was pretty clear that they had a personal relationship, and then when I start speaking to people, in the building, seeing what's going on, then it kind of became more evident that, okay, there's more to the story. And one such interaction, I was at an event for the 100 Club, which is a charitable organization that supports fallen law enforcement, and I saw both of them come out of the building. I'm having a separate conversation, and she came up to me. She was very pleasant. Hi Sean, how you doing? And I kind of spoke to her. I didn't really acknowledge him, and he literally barks at her and says, "Sheriff, we have to go now." And she's like, "Oh yeah, we have another event," and they both leave and go wherever. And I found that odd, very odd, because why would this civilian staff member speak to the sheriff that way? And then again, speaking to other people, having similar experiences.
Yeah,
Eliot, how about you? What have you had much interaction with Victor Aenlle through the time?
No, actually, until Sheriff Corpus got elected, I actually hadn't heard of him. But again, the sheriff's office is big enough, and it sounds like his role, he was helping out with some range staff things for however long, but it was stuff where it was never around the same time that I was doing things. So I had no idea who he was. And then since she got elected, I'd seen him a couple times. It took me a little while to know who he was. But I only met him in person a handful of times. And, I prefer to keep things polite and professional. And at the time, I didn't have any real reason. The last time I had actually interacted with him in person, I didn't have, it was at a community event up in either Woodside or Patola Valley. I forget exactly which one. I didn't have any reason to be concerned at the time. It was shortly before right after I got elected to the board. So for me personally, I didn't, but if I were to see him now, I'd be pretty concerned.
He's carrying a badge. I think it says Chief of Staff across the top. Does that bother you, Sean?
It does. And, I know he's, made comments that the sheriff can give him whatever badge he wants, but in my opinion, he parades around that he's a reserve deputy sheriff. And, that, gold badge on your chest, in my opinion, that's something that's earned. And, that's earned by, the men and women that work here that put their lives on the line every single day. And to get a badge that says Chief of Staff, whether it's given to you or not, to wear that out, on a sheriff's office uniform with a gun is, that's telling to me. That's very, that's a statement to say, I'm, I view myself as more than somebody that's just a reserve deputy sheriff. Now, whether that's the case or not, that's how I interpret it. And, again, I don't know if he's still wearing that badge, but, obviously there's photographic proof that he was wearing it at a community event. I think it's very inappropriate.
Eliot, you've described this as union busting. And in one of the arguments that the sheriff has made in her various statements is that this is nothing more than a labor dispute. And that basically it's a group of people objecting to changes that she knew were necessary to make to this department. In particular, she's mentioned that overtime was out of control and was busting the sheriff's office budget. And that when she tried to crack down on unnecessary overtime, that's when you guys began to object to the way she was running the office. What are your thoughts about all that?
So that is a pure lie and misdirection. This is much, much more than a labor dispute. That doesn't mean that labor issues are not a part of it. That first meeting I discussed and the unfair labor practices that we have alleged given her administration's refusal to properly meet and confer over a multitude of issues. But the double overtime issue that she talks about, double overtime was something that was negotiated between the sheriff's office, the unions, and the county well before I got on the board. And it actually ended before I got on the board. It was a 6-month trial period that was meant to help with recruitment and retention and having people work more overtime given our staffing shortages. It's not the root of this. The DSA board has, since I've been on the board, the only time double overtime has been mentioned as something that, we've talked about would be nice to have in the future. It has nothing to do with any of the current issues. What labor issues do have to do are mandatory overtime policies regarding minimum and maximum staffing numbers, policies regarding pursuits, policies regarding a million things. And when Sheriff Corpus talks about a resistance to change, she hasn't given a single example of what kind of change she wants to implement other than apparently, completely ignoring the unions. But she hasn't talked about a policy change. She hasn't talked about wanting to change how we do certain things. Nothing. We can't resist something that doesn't exist. We have no idea what change she wanted to make. So when she says it's a resistance thing, it's a lie. She's lying.
Sean, one of the things she did say during the campaign, and actually heard Victor Aenlle say this himself, was that there were people who needed to go. That, you keep hearing the phrase, the old boys network, that it isn't so much policy as it is getting rid of people who were dragging the office down, who were not good law enforcement, were not doing a good job of holding this office to a higher standard. So she's still characterizing it as the old boys network backlash against her making efforts to change the culture and change the dynamic there.
Well, I mean, she's probably including the very people that she brought in on her command staff that have since gone, including her handpicked undersheriff, assistant sheriff that she's fired, and 2 captains that have quit on her watch. So again, we don't know. She's never mentioned who she's talking about, what she's talking about. We don't, she's never given us examples of who or what kind of behavior. It's just some buzzwords as to we are all against reform. We don't know what reform she wants to make. That's never been made clear to us. We can't reject or fight something that we don't know. She's never given us directive on. So I think that saying that is just another. It's a lie, because if she really wanted to address some of these issues, we would actually get an explanation as to why did Undersheriff Shung quit. Why did she really fire Ryan Monahan? Why did the captain that did the Tapia investigation, or I'm sorry, acting assistant sheriff, quit the same week that the arrest was made? Why did Captain Phillip refuse to make the arrest and quit directly afterwards? She's never explained that to us either. So her not explaining what she means by some old boys club, and apparently, the old boys club is pretty rotten in SFPD too, because they themselves have sent out a letter, uninviting her to events. So I have no idea what she's talking about when she refers to that.
Yeah.
Eliot, what would happen if Measure A is defeated in about 10 days? What would be the next steps after that? Excuse me.
The boards haven't really had that discussion to a certain degree. I know there is a recall movement which is ongoing. Right now, the DSA board isn't a part of that, but that would be a discussion we would need to have. I think, however, there would be a significant amount of disappointment, and I think just given what we're facing, it would be a pretty bitter pill, because it would be, I think a lot of us would look at it as the community saying that our concerns and that our safety and our livelihood doesn't matter, or is somehow less important than some other issue. But I am very confident, given the massive amount of support we have, that Measure A is going to pass. And I encourage everybody to fill out their ballots, vote yes on Measure A. And my hope is that those hypothetical what ifs will remain just that, a hypothetical what if.
Sean, even before there's a recall, if this measure doesn't pass, it means the sheriff is fully invested in the office. My suspicion is that she would immediately move to bring Victor Aenlle back into the office. What would the impact to the sheriff's office, to the staff, to the rank and file be if this measure doesn't pass?
I mean, I don't want to say catastrophic because we're professionals. I work with some of the most outstanding men and women. I consider myself very lucky to work with these people, but the stress that they've been under and the mere fact that, that happening would be, it would be extremely bad for morale. I would predict that we would probably lose, a handful of people off the bat, and and probably more to follow. People can only take so much. People can only take so much stress, and this job is very stressful, as I'm sure you guys both can understand. And to add more on top of that, like they've been going through for the past 2 years, is it's pretty much untenable.
According to the most recent campaign finance filing, which was just last week, the Yes on A campaign has raised over $118,000, spent over $163,000. I went through, and there was about $28,000 from other law enforcement agencies. Sean, you mentioned the letter by the SFPOA. It was an event honoring 50 years of women serving in the police office, the police department, and she had RSVP'd, and they basically disinvited her, told her not to come, that it would be an affront to the issues they were trying to honor. So just FYI, explain what that's about. But the question is, if she is not out of office, is she, and has she become an outcast within law enforcement? Because quite a few members of the law enforcement community have clearly stepped up and participated in the yes side of this campaign. Eliot?
I would say absolutely. One of the very nice things about this is how much support we've received, not just from the community, and that's obviously huge, but from our fellow law enforcement officers, from people who have been in the trenches just like we are and see what's going on. And it really shows that they care. And I do believe she's an outcast. However, some of that is of her, all of it is technically of her own making, given her actions, but she has also chosen to absent herself from several different events. She's chosen not to show up to chiefs meetings within the county. She's chosen not to show up to different organizations, different trainings. She's chosen not to show up. So she's made herself an outcast with that alone. And then her actions, her behavior have definitely made her an outcast within the law enforcement community. When I see, academy buddies or people I know in other agencies, usually the first thing they do is check in, hey, how are you doing? And then it becomes, oh my goodness, what is going on with your sheriff? And the support that we've seen from them and the number of people who have donated is pretty nice for us.
If the election is successful, how soon would you expect the board to act and to remove the sheriff? Any ideas how long that process might take?
We haven't spoken to anybody. We don't have any more information than anybody else in regards to that. I wish we did. It's a question I get asked literally every single day. What's going to happen if this passes? And we don't know. My hope would be that it would be soon to mitigate any, because another real fear and something that's been expressed to me on many occasions is, if this passes and, we're in that weird limbo time before they make a decision, there's a lot of damage that can get done. There's a lot of people that can get messed with. There's a lot of people that, that have a lot to lose. And it's a legitimate concern. So it's something that we as, the OSS and the DSA collectively are speaking about and are kind of trying to wrap our heads around still.
Right. She had about 20 years plus of experience in the office. She did hire as her undersheriff, assistant sheriff, and even as a captain, people from other departments who had excellent credentials and really national reputations for excellence. What went wrong? I mean, she was elected amid a lot of optimism that it was sort of a new day. They were electing a woman to a job, a Latina, who an office that had never been held by a Latina before. People felt that her predecessor was sort of part of an old, tired network of an old boys network, if you will. What's your sense of what went wrong? Because she made some good hires at the command staff level, it seems to me, from an outsider's perspective, at the beginning of her tenure.
I think, well, a couple things. One, just to touch on, the previous sheriff in an old boy network. Let's not forget that the previous sheriff also promoted Corpus to the position of captain. So if there was an old boy network in in the old administration, she was absolutely a part of it. As far as what went wrong, I don't want to speak for anyone, but I think a lot of it was that she hired people and then ignored them. And how much of that was because Victor Aenlle was telling her to ignore them, giving her bad advice, or how much of that was her on her own deciding to ignore them, I don't know. But when you have a lot of smart individuals whose voices ended up going unheard, that's a challenge. This is an organization which is significant in size, and you can't run it by yourself. And you also can't run it like a dictator. While we do have a chain of command, you have to work collaboratively with the people who are beneath you. And just from what I've heard and seen, it really does seem like everyone else's voices were getting ignored or shut down. And if they contradicted Victor's in any way, they were getting ignored or shut down. And as you see now, it's just her and Under Sheriff Perea, and that's it. We have no assistant sheriffs. We have a couple vacant captain positions, and there is that leadership vacuum that Sean discussed earlier. So, I'm not quite ready to do a postmortem on the Corpus administration yet, but I think that's going to be a good place to start, is that these smart, capable, nationally renowned people were getting ignored.
Sean, same question. Where do you think things went off the rails?
Oh, I honestly think, Eliot hit it right on that, right on the head, is if you bring in capable people that are, like you said, nationally renowned for their talents, and you just don't listen to them. You don't allow them to have input on the things that they were literally brought in to have input on. Things are going to go off the rails very quickly. The reasoning behind it, again, we all suspect that it sits solely on on Victor's shoulders, and that he was able to wrestle the reins away from the sheriff's office from her and act as the de facto sheriff. But the buck stops at her. She's the sheriff. She's the head chief law enforcement officer in the county. And when you have that much turnover at that level, the executive level, it's very, very damaging. And it's, in my tenure at the sheriff's office, having an assistant sheriff retire is a huge deal. And that happened, every 5 years, maybe. We've had, under 2 years, we've had an under sheriff, an assistant sheriff. So just the complete lack of communication and allowing your executive team to do what they were brought in to do was definitely the beginning of the end for her.
Eliot, as was mentioned, a lot of people have left the department, some by their own decision, some by being fired. Do you think that possibly some of those people may return if the sheriff is removed and there's a new administration?
I'm not sure. I would hope that some of them would come back. There's plenty of people who I really enjoyed working with or working for who have left. And the sheriff's office, when I started, I've been here for a little over 8 years. And when I started, the sheriff's office was a place that people came to, not a place that people left. And it would be nice to be that again. It would be nice to have some people come back, have people understand, hey, this is a place that they once really enjoyed working, and they can really enjoy working for again, and that we can really build this place back to what it needs to be. So I would hope so. Ultimately, everyone makes their own decisions, but I would hope so.
I want to get back into the question of urgency again, because, the sheriff's office is unique. I don't need you to tell you that, but in addition to patrol, there are so many other responsibilities. When I was at Caltrain, I actually had supervisory role over the police unit that was policing the entire Caltrain right of way. But most importantly, I think, is the jail, which is the 24/7, 365-day responsibility. And it's a massive responsibility. So you start talking about overtime, you start talking about staff shortages. I mean, how much at risk is this office of, Sean, some really awful things happening if this isn't resolved fairly soon?
Well, I mean, like you said, I mean, I think that the jail is our main function. We are a sheriff's office. Corrections is something that we sit solely upon our shoulders, and we are dependent upon by every single municipality in this county to staff the jail, to make sure that it's safely staffed, to make sure that these incarcerated persons are safe, that they are being rehabilitated, that they are given the care that they need, and but that also involves making sure that our staff in the jail is safe, making sure that they have the training, the equipment, the staffing to be able to safely do their jobs. And I think that that absolutely leans into the exigency of what we're facing. If this problem is not fixed, if we don't have competent leadership at the top, it is only going to get worse. We're going to lose more people, and we're not going to be able to retain the experience and the quality that we've been accustomed to. And that will and certainly can be catastrophic.
As I mentioned, I quoted before, the Cordell report talks specifically about an atmosphere of intimidation and retaliation. Are you worried about what kind of risk each of you is taking by being so high profile on this yes on a proposal? Eliot?
Do you want Eliot or do you want me? Absolutely. I've thought about it. I've talked to the people. I've talked to my wife about it. And at the end of the day, leaders have to step up and lead. And if we have any hopes of rebuilding this agency and making sure that it's in good hands moving forward, then us in the building need to make sure that we're able to step up, do the right thing, speak for the people that can't speak for themselves, or that maybe in many circumstances too scared to speak for themselves, and put the target on our backs.
Eliot?
Yeah, very, very similar to what Sean said. It's definitely scary. I'm very, very concerned about retaliation. But at the same time, there aren't a ton of issues in this world that are black and white, and there's a clear right and a clear wrong. But this is one of them. And we all got into this profession because we wanted to do right. We wanted to take bad people off the street. We wanted to do good things for the community and for the people we work for. And this is an opportunity to do that. And this is an opportunity to make this agency a phenomenal place and to be able to do all that. So for me, it's worth it. I'm very, very happy to have the support of so many people in the public, so many fellow law enforcement officers, so many people within the agency. And my hope is that Measure A passes and we can go back to just doing our regular jobs again.
Eliot Storch from the Deputy Sheriff's Association, Sean Harper from the Organization of the Sheriff's Sergeant are both leaders of the campaign to approve Measure A, which would amend the county charter temporarily to allow the Board of Supervisors to consider whether to fire Sheriff Christina Corpus. Thank you both for being here. We'll see you, I'm sure, around it, and hopefully we're going to do a special show election night. Hopefully we can have both of you on. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
I want to reiterate that we have on many occasions invited the sheriff to come on and do a similar interview. We've also extended the same invitation to the Chief of Staff, Victor Aenlle. Both of them have said they will come on, and then when we ask them for dates, we won't hear from them again. That offer still is extended, and we would love to have them on right up until March 4th, at which point it may not be much point. In the meantime, thank you for watching the game. You can find us on anywhere you see your podcast, and there's our our link to our show. So I'm Mark Simon.
And I'm Bob Marks.
Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time on The Game.